Hello and welcome to a very special podcast series where we have decided to pick a New South Wales Cup Team of the Decade. We don't really have a name yet. We just sort of, this is our first pod. We're just rolling as we see it. So we've decided to look back through the years to see which players deserve a spot in the Team of the Decade for the New South Wales Cup, Canterbury Cup, Intrust Super Premiership, whatever you want to call it. I'm joined by two very special guests. The first is Terry Liberopoulos, the editor of Rugby League Review and long-time New South Wales Cup man. Myself and Terry have worked many years dealing with the New South Wales Cup. Terry, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Mate, I'm not too bad. My next guest is joining Terry is Steve Russo, a former Rugby League Week journalist, now part of the Newtown Jets media team, looks after all their social. Thanks for joining us, Steve. How's things?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Just living the life in self-isolation.
Yeah.
Doesn't get any better.
How is things in self-iso, guys?
From my perspective, it's all right. Still just, I'm recently retrenched, but I've just taken some time out to do a bit of studying and stuff like that, helping out the Jets. But it could be a lot worse. I'm in a pretty lucky position at the moment, so I'm not too stroppy about it.
What about you, Terry?
Yep. I'm still working with Rugby League Review. That's still going. It's all systems go. As long as the distributors and the printers are open, I'm open.
Yeah.
It's business as usual.
Yeah, the good thing I like about your magazine, Terry, is it's not just all NRL. You get everything. I know it's going to be a bit harder this year to fill pages with some of those other comps not happening, but it's a full sort of coverage of everything rugby league, not just the NRL. Another thing quickly, Greece into the World Cup, is that official? Like, I'm sure I saw that. Greece are playing in 2021?
Yeah, 2021, Greece is in. Beat Serbia 82-6 to get through. That was the 15th spot. Cook Islands took the other one. Very happy. We've been going for nearly 20 years, and our aim was to get into the World Cup. So now we're playing in the same group as England. So who knows? Like Greece versus England. Look, of course, England are going to be favourites, but it's just great for the game of rugby league in Greece. People that have organised rugby league for the last 7-8 years. It's a reward for them, and you will see some Greek players in our squad playing in the World Cup.
That's awesome.
Just going back, is the mighty Billy Magoulias playing? I know he's not strictly a Greek player, but will be lighting up for the Greeks in 2021?
He played against Scotland and the Serbia game. He came over and played for that game for us. So he's played 3 times for Greece, and he's very, very proud Greek or proud Greek Australian, and he'll definitely be there. Bearing any injury, he'll be playing for Greece. Like I said, the domestic scene, we're probably going to have a few players from there. Well, we definitely will have some few players from their local competition, which just only a few short years ago you wouldn't have imagined someone just playing park footy down the road in Athens, going to be playing on the world stage.
Up against England, who probably you're every shot to beat because they're no good, don't worry about them. But knowing how hard it is and being around those, not lower tiers, probably not the word, but the second tier nations, it's a big congratulations to everyone involved in that because you know how hard it is putting those things together, getting blokes all around the world to organise to play those games. But enough on the international scene. Let's dive straight first into the New South Wales Cup Team of the Decade. We're going to go through and look through the Team of the Years for the last, from 2010 onwards. But first, we need to come to an agreement or at least start talking about what format it's going to do. Who do we pick? What's the criteria? Do we have just a pure New South Wales Cup Team of the Decade of blokes who are what we used to call back in the day cup men? So, your Jared Farlows, your Mitch Williams, who never made that jump but have made a massive contribution to that level of football. Do we have a New South Wales Cup Team of the Decade like that, and we have a New South Wales Cup graduates where you're talking the guys that have played a good whack of time in the New South Wales Cup, like your Damien Cooks, who's now the Australian hooker, your Chad Townsends, the Marty Tapau's, who's an international forward. What are your thoughts on that, Terry?
I think, they've got to make an impact on New South Wales Cup. Whether they went on to play NRL, it doesn't matter. As long as they made a big impact in the New South Wales Cup, they can't just come in there and, in my opinion, played, say, half a season in the New South Wales Cup, had a great season, probably made the Team of the Year, and that's it. They went straight to first grade, and they've remained in the NRL ever since. As long as they had an impact, whether they just were only New South Wales Cup players or they went on to become internationals, I think we're talking about the New South Wales Cup, so they have to have an impact on the competition.
Your thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Terry here. Ideally, it'd be somebody. I'm fine with them being NRL graduates, but if they're NRL graduates and they've gone on to play first grade, they better have had a pretty decent spell in New South Wales Cup and learn to play against men, as the old adage goes.
Okay, all right, I'm happy with that. So maybe we put after we publish this episode, we put it online on YouTube and all the podcast networks. We'll have an article up and people, and there's actually a link. There'll be a link in the description of this video and on the podcast that you can send us voice messages to voice your opinion, and we're happy to take those opinions. But we'll start our look at the teams of the year. So the 2010 team of the year. We'll start with the grand final. The Bulldogs 24 defeated Windsor 12. So the Dogs finished first, Windsor finished fourth. Scott Porter of Cronulla narrowly pips Dave Gower for Player of the Year. Looking back at that Bulldogs side, they were very, very, very hot side, Steve.
Yeah, like just looking at some of the names here that have gone on to play first grade or even in that team of the year. I mean, looking through there, Josh Reynolds, even on the bench, and we know that he's gone on to be a State of Origin winning 5'8", alongside another man who had a bit of a stint in New South Wales Cup in Trent Hodkinson. I know he's not in that team, but yeah, that was a pretty good Bulldog side. I think Corey Payne was in that side as well, the former Bulldogs chief executive.
Yeah, I'll read through their team just before I get to you, Terry. So at fullback was Michael Lett from the Shell Harbour Dragons. On one wing was Kevin Naguama from the Central Coast Centurions. On the one centre was Tu Maori from the Jets. Another centre, Jamie Simpson from the Bears. Reece Pritchard on the wing from the Magpies. Gareth Witter, as current England international, from the Storm, was at 5'8". Peter Godinay, one of the great New South Wales Cup halfbacks and one of my favourite players of all time in the New South Wales Cup, was the halfback. David Gower, another player of mine who's one of my favourites, was at the prop. Anthony Mitchell, Jesse Bromwich, the other front rowers. In the back row was Matty Ryan from Balmain Ride Eastwood, Daniel Harrison from the Bulldogs, Jared Farlow from Balmain Ride Eastwood, who was the captain. And on the bench was Josh Reynolds, Daniel Rakava, Tim Brown and Joel Edwards, with an 18th man being Lance and Judo. So pretty hot year. I remember doing the residence that year, and I think we had Justin O'Neill, who went on to play for Queensland, Gareth Widdop, who's an international, Jesse Bromwich is an international, Kevin Naguama's international in his own right. So it was a pretty stacked year for New South Wales Cup. Of course, this was in the midst of the Holden Cup years, which was interesting to some of those guys. Gareth would have been pretty young back then in 2010. I don't know his age right now, but he would have been very young.
I reckon he'd be 21, Prez.
He would have been 21? Okay, yeah. Yep. So, those guys coming fresh out of that year. Tez, what do you think about the team? Anyone stands out for you that you think's an automatic selection in our team of the decade already?
Well, the one that was always that reminded me was David Gower. He, week in, week out, he was like the typical New South Wales Cup player, playing hard, and you used to always go, is he going to get a chance in the NRL? And you'll get one game here, one game there before he became a regular NRL player. And this was hard footy. This is, New South Wales Cup. People got to remember 2010, 11, even from 2008, a lot of the teams didn't really disregard the New South Wales Cup. They went straight from the Holden Cup, picked players from there, and put them straight into first grade. Yep. And a lot of them, they weren't picking them in the New South Wales Cup. Then they slowly realised, a lot of them, after the first couple of years Holden Cup, this is the way to go. And you'll see all these hard men, they're coming through, as you say, all these New South Wales Cup teams. But going back to those players, like I said, David Gower was one, but then I like Josh Reynolds. I used to really like watching him play for Canterbury there. He used to make a huge difference. And you got Jared Farlow there, who was the captain of the year there. They were the guys that used to make a big difference. Daniel Harrison, week in, week out. If those guys were playing, and they were there regularly, probably 90% of the time, and they made a big difference. That's why Canterbury won it. I mean, the year before they were called Bankstown City Bulls. Yep. And they went on to win in 2011. They had a good team, and you look at those players like Harrison and Reynolds and a few other players, and they were always there. They always had the same team.
Yeah, I agree on the Gower point. It was flummoxing for me to watch him in those years. Starting in 8, 9, 10, watching him play for Balmain Ride. He was the best player, not just forward player in the New South Wales Cup. He was you could tell he was that class above but for some reason would never get a start in first grade. I used to sit every week, scratch my head, watch his game. Yeah, how's this bloke not playing first grade? Like, he didn't. I'm sure he played his 100th game maybe last year or something. I said he should be playing. That should be his 200th game, let alone that. He's one we really should target trying to get on. Because it'd be interesting to talk to him because he had time later in his career back with the Cutters when he was at the Dragons. He's had some time with Wenny. He would be a good gauge to tell the story of the New South Wales Cup through this decade. Who else? Paul Fletcher. Yeah, sorry, go.
You can also tell us the standard. Like, you can compare it. Like, he was there for many, many years playing regular, New South Wales Cup footy.
Yep. Paul Fletcher he was the coach of the 2010 team. I'd love to hear some stories about Paul Fletcher too. He's quite a character. The 2011 team. So 2011, the Bulldogs, another year for the Bulls. That was the third year in a row. They beat the Vulcans 30-28. This was the start of the resurgence for me. I think we had 496,000 viewers tune into the GF that year, and so it probably would have had a big. This was nationally, so not including New Zealand. It outrated the VFL. It smashed the QRLGF. It was. You could tell. The one thing that I noticed that year was the emotion in the game. Almost years before when people had won, there wasn't a lot of emotion around it. The Bulldogs, when they won, they went ballistic. They farewelled guys like Michael Hodgson, who'd played 204 first grade games, Chris Armott, Brad Moran, Ben Roberts, Michael Letton, all that sort of left. That was the start of the resurgence for me. So I'll roll through their team, the team of the year for that year. So Glenn Fisiahi from the Vulcans, Curtis Johnson from the Bears, who was playing last year too. I think he's a great big character. Troy Savage from Wenny Magpies, Ricky Latelli from the Sharks, another appearance for Michael Lett, Ben Roberts, another appearance for Josh Reynolds, James Gavay from the Vulcans, Beau Falloon, who was the player of the year that year from the North Sydney Bears, Carla Deeb from the Jets, Ahmed Elaz from the Jets, who I'm a big fan of, David Harris from the Magpies, Darcy Lussick from the Seagulls was the lock, Peter Godinay makes another appearance, this time in jersey 14, George Burgess from the Bears, Marty Tapau from the Bulldogs, and Matty Ryan makes another appearance with 18 man being Trent Cutler, and the coach was Richie Blackmore, which was, I think, due to his getting that Auckland Vulcans team to the grand final. Anyone stand out there for you, Steve?
Oh yeah, well, Josh Reynolds again. He's someone. Once again, he was. I think 2011 was actually a pretty big year for Josh, because I think that's when he made his first grade debut as well. And from my perspective, I'm going to say it now, he's a walk-in for this team from my perspective.
Yeah,
he was so good at New South Wales Cup level, and then he stepped up to first grade. So I think he's one of the success stories of the New South Wales Cup, and a guy who really kind of can owe, and I'm sure he'd have no problem saying this, can owe his success in first grade to the kind of foundation he built in the New South Wales Cup. Another person in there that I think, I've got a bit of a bias here because I'm a bit of a Newtown man myself, even though I have a history as a Balmain fan as well. Caleb Deeb was a tour de force for the Jets, and I think he's still a bit of a fan favourite down Henson Parkway. So I'd be keen to see him in there. And even Peter Godinay. I know Peter never really had an extensive first grade career, but those stints, he had a couple of good stints in first grade with the Warriors as a kind of hooker and halfback, but at New South Wales Cup level, electric player. And I don't know, I'd love to see him in the mix. I think he deserves a spot. But Brad, just incidentally, I showed you that team list for that 2011 Canterbury Bankstown side. I think there was 19 players named in the squad that week, and all of them at one point played first grade.
Yeah, no, they were very, very high. And look, the Bulldogs, there's different levels of clubs, and I'm sure Terry knows this as well. There's different level of club involvement and buy-in to the competition where, we always used to get asked, could you produce a media guide for the clubs? And we're like, well, yeah, but you go to a club like Manly who would feed 5 or 6 players back to a team like Bankstown City, or not Bankstown City, where are they now? Blacktown Workers. But they go to a club where the Bulldogs would have a full team, and they'd understand the process. 20s kids would progress up to New South Wales Cup, and they'd say you've been elevated, and it was hard to do when you had some clubs would be different sort of levels of buy-in. But Terry, is there any players there that stand out for you, especially in that 2011 Team of the Year?
Well, Steve did mention Carly Deep. He was an institution at Newtown. He played many years there. He was their captain of the year. The other guy there was David Harris, and this is what the New South Wales Cup was all about. You had some good players that could play very good in the New South Wales Cup, but just the next step up to the next level. And you look at the winger Curtis Johnson. Scored a lot of tries there, but just couldn't crack it for the NRL spot. And there's a few players in there that just couldn't do it, even though they were superstars in the New South Wales Cup, and they could play well against the likes of Ben Reynolds, Josh Reynolds, like you mentioned, that went on to play NRL.
Yeah. So now we'll jump into 2012, which I'm going to be on record now as saying this is peak New South Wales Cup for me. So the 2012 season, so that we get through to the semis, Balmain, Newtown, North Sydney, and the Knights are all in the semis. I remember feeling like I'd actually done a good job for once. I think it was Newtown and North Sydney at Leichhardt Oval. There would have been 7,000 or 8,000 people there, and I think that's being a little bit talking down a little bit. It could have been more. Hopefully we can get the great man Greg Nichols on to talk us through that game, because there was a moment in that game where he was one of the New South Wales Cup operations staff. He gives away the penalty that Daniel Mortimer kicks to win the game for Newtown. That
was a controversial penalty, though. This is coming from someone from Newtown.
He blew up all week in the office about it too. Don't worry.
I think Cherrington got extraordinarily lucky there, and this is from someone who has connections in Newtown. I think Cherrington was very lucky.
Yeah, but I think from memory, I think the Jets and Balmain that year came from 7th and 8th, which shows.
Yeah,
it's a
right. Newtown was 7th. Newtown was 7th, and we're 8th.
Yeah, so the Jets pumped the Dogs 34-6 in the semi. Balmain just edged the Knights by 2, and then you go through to that day. It was one of the great days because it helps being from that media role, speaking from the media role, that you have a team with that following, that affinity with, they're a team of the people. The Jets, everyone goes for the Jets, so that day made our jobs a lot easier, but it also gave the New South Wales Cup a big boost in sort of public power, if that's a term I could use. The scenes from the outpouring of emotion from the blokes like Stu McCarthy's of the world and the Terry Rowney's, these guys go and work every Saturday doing 14, 15-hour days just looking after these teams' needs, where sometimes you're dealing with blokes who are kicking the dirt from coming down from first grade who don't want to be there. You got to be there and cop their grunts and all that sort of stuff. It's good to see. I remember on the day sitting there feeling like, it's good for these people to get this time. And Terry Rowney was probably pumped, hundreds of thousands of dollars into that club. Him and his outpouring of emotion was really good to see. Steve, were you there? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was actually there because I was interning for the Canberra Raiders while at uni. Big shout out to my old boss, Ben Pollock, still at the Canberra Raiders.
Yep.
I was covering the NYC game, but I turned up because people who know me, I turned up early for this game because I'm a big Balmain fan.
Yep.
But obviously now I work for Newtown. But I really turned up wanting to watch Balmain win, and I didn't mind. My second team was Newtown. I'd been going to Henson Park since about 2005, a regular attender at the old Pringle Ryan Shield games. So I was pumped for this one, and I turned up early, got down there, watched the game, and obviously at the end of the day I was disappointed, but at the same time I was really happy because I knew the hard work that went into Newtown, and I have a soft spot for Newtown. In fact, it was a bit of a turning point because I kind of was a bit disappointed when they decided to merge Balmain and Western Suburbs at New South Wales Cup level. So that was a pretty momentous day for me. That kind of sealed me jumping ship to Newtown in New South Wales Cup.
And what about you, Terry? Terry, you would have been there. Sorry, Steve. Terry, you would have been there on the day. Could you describe some of the scenes you would have seen from the Terry Rowneys and the Stu McCarthys of the Jets?
It was I remember it was a great game because both teams scored 4 tries, and in the end it was Newtown that won on the goal kicking of Daniel Mortimer, 22-18. Yep. But the Newtown fans, I just remember there was quite a few of them that were there. They enjoyed the day. They were cheering them on, and then all of a sudden they disappeared. They went back. They all went back. They didn't stay for the NRL, most of them, for the grand final, because back then the New South Wales Cup was played on NRL grand final day.
Yeah.
And a lot of good players in there, like, the Daniel Tupus, the young guys there, Isaac Gloob, Daniel Mortimer, like I said before.
Yep.
They had Justin Carney playing. And people didn't realise that when Balmain played that game, it was the last time the Balmain will play at senior level under the Balmain Tigers name.
Well, it's a big moment. All right, I'll read through the team of the year.
Just incidentally, sorry to interrupt. There's one guy who's not in that team who I think was a bit hard done by, and he sealed that grand final for Newtown. That's got to be Nafe Siluini.
Yeah, he scored a try. Very good.
And Balmain were starting to kind of edge Newtown ahead in the back end of that second half, and then Nafe clicked into gear and he scored that try that sealed the game. And I think I know a lot of people in Newtown way say he played a big part in that game, so he'd be someone I'd be looking at, even if he didn't have the longest New South Wales Cup career.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'd take your tip. I'll read through the team of the year. So another appearance for Michael Lett, this time at fullback. Interesting side note on this. This is the year Michael Lett played for both the Illawarra Cutters and Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, and I do remember to this date he was the He was the top try scorer for both teams in the New South Wales Cup that year. So he started at the Bulldogs, then got an offer to play get a job down in the Mines, and went down to play with the Cutters. And he was a top try scorer for both teams. And I remember at the time, Jamie and myself, my offsider at the time, we rung David Middleton and said, has this ever been done in any form of top-ish tier of competition? He said, no, it's never been done. So that's a little slice of history Michael Lett can own. So on the wing was Josh Mandelato from the Knights. In the centres was Suatonga Licky, one of the great rugby league names. Ricky Latelli, Daniel Tupou on a wing. Joel Romello from the Dogs and Ryan Curran from the Bears in the halves. Shane Shackleton, who was the player of the year at that time from Wenny Magpies, and then he went to Windsor. Nathan Smith was the vice-captain from Wenny in the hooking role. Jack Stockwell, David Gow, both from the Cutters, and Marvin Filippo from the Knights were in the back row and front row, and Harlan Alalatel from the Dogs was the lock. So the bench was Justin Hunt, Josh Davis, Mitch Adchurch, and Paul Vaughan, with Sam Lousy being the 18th man. So there's plenty of star power there, Terry.
Oh, plenty. You look even on the bench, you got Paul Vaughan from Mounties. He was really starting to find his feet, and look at him, where he's gone now. But then you had a lot of those players, like you said, the New South Wales Cup. That was a great year for you, media-wise. But a lot of the players, look at just the quality of those players. Ricky Latelli's in there, Daniel Tupou, Shane Shackleton. There's a good side that side could have beaten anyone. The representative front.
Vaughan, I think it was that year he got picked in the residence team, and he was sort of like third drop after a few injuries and came through and got picked, but then was the best player on the field by a mile. He was still like he's now big, physical, imposing sort of bloke. Really nice guy, great bloke. Says hello to me whenever time I see him. Just drop in the name I walked over. But no, he's another one that you could consider. Like, I'm sure he played a decent amount of cup. I think even went back to Mounties at a time he was at the Raiders. So
he played a fair bit, which is good. He's one of those that definitely have to consider.
I never really thought about Michael Lett, but now that I'm seeing appearing in all these teams and in that record, he's really shaping up as someone who could probably get a spot in this thing, in this team. It's also good seeing Josh Mantellato appear. Yeah. I get a feeling he'll be appearing a few more times in this list.
Yeah, he does. Well, I think that year, I'm not 100% sure if he was the highest point scorer, but he was very close. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe that is the year that he debuted in the NRL, scored his try and debut, and then I think he only played one game. But it's good to see a player like him get rewarded. So 2013, there was really, when you look back at it, only one team that was ever going to win the comp, and that was the Cronulla Sharks. They defeated Windsor 36-8 in the grand final. I think Windsor, if I look at my notes, Windsor came from fourth to get there. But you read this Cronulla team out. So this was a combination of Cronulla and Melbourne, what we need you to do. So players from Melbourne would fly up to play with the Sharks. So Cronulla had a team: Townsend, Peachy, Michael Leisha, Junior Moores was down in Melbourne, Sasia Vave, young Tonomaipio, who's just signed with the Titans at the moment, and Kirisomi Ava'a. So these are all players that Tony Herman had at his disposal to play this grand final against Windsor, who still had a decent team. I'm pretty sure Matty Moylan played in that team. There were some good players from Windsor, but that that team from Cronulla was always going to be hard to beat. Even having some of the players they didn't have on the day. I think Dane Weston was injured. Another 2 players that escape me at the moment weren't available for that team, and they still sort of won it easy. Would have been a good day for you, Terry, up Cronulla.
It was, it was a while since they won anything, and I took the win. But you got to remember that Cronulla they were minor premiers that year, but they lost 2 wins in the first week of the playoffs. And
I do remember that actually.
And speaking to Tony Herman, he said that's what we needed because you started to get to their head that they were invincible, and then they came back, thrashed the New Zealand Jets 54-18 in the semi-finals. Thrashed North Sydney, and they were never going to be stopped. He said, and you talk to some players. I remember talking to Townsend on that day. They said we knew we were going to win. Yeah. And they won. And what you said, 36-8 in the grand final, and it was, they were by far the best side in the competition. And even though they did have Melbourne, okay, they had a few of the players there, but bearing that in mind, they were still the best side, and there's some good plays in there. Like you got Nathan Garner, the Chet Townsend was, Junior Moores, Tyrone Peachy. Don't forget him. They were unstoppable, and it was a very good year for me because, of course, I'm a Sharks man.
Not as good as 2016 though.
We'll get there. That was
great year. So I'll read.
One premiership before I die, I think.
Yeah. I'll go through the team of the year. So the player of the year was Mitch Williams from the Warangaroos. At fullback was Hanari Wells, a real lightning, speedy guy from the Jets. Josh Manolato, Peter Mataudia from the Knights were in 2 and 3. Stuart Mills from the Sharks, who had a really, really good year for them. Edo Nabuli from the Wolves, who then went to play first grade with the Dragons for a little bit. Darren Nichols from the Bears was the 5'8". Chad Townsend was the half. Josh Starling from the Bears was the prop. Mitch Williams at the hooker. Sawia Matangi, who I was a big fan of when he played New South Wales Cup in first grade. Kenny Edwards from the Magpies and Tupu Sopawanga and Tyrone Peachy round out the back row. Number 14, the current Australian hooker Damien Cook. Number 15, current Parramatta Eel Kane Evans. Number 16, Sam Anderson, who's a very big cut man, both QRL and New South Wales Cup, who still is having success. I don't know if he's playing this year, but he played last year, I'm sure of it. Jason Clark from the Bears, and 80th man was Jared Farlow. Tony Herman was the coach. Steve, can you see anything there that you like?
Yeah, Mantellato again, of course. I think he's another guy I'd like to get in there. I mean, one person, once again, and you and I were talking about the biases that came out of the 3-2-1 system, but Mitch Williams, I know he used to get a lot of Player of the Year votes because he was a standout in a Wyong side that didn't have any kind of links to a first grade club, but he was a very handy player.
Yeah,
and I think he's one guy who deserves to be considered for a hooking spot because he was a very wholehearted player and he did do some good things. And I think he ended up getting a bit of a run in the Nines rather than the Roosters or Newcastle.
No, he played for the Roosters. Yeah, he played for the Roosters in the Nines, yep.
So he'd one guy I'd be looking at as well. Then again, Damien Cook also starting to appear as well. So there's another number 9. There's another number 9. So
quite a handy number 9 at that.
Yeah. Well, looking at this, I think this is one of the stronger teams I've seen so far. Actually, there's a lot of blokes who played first grade in here.
Yeah, no, that's probably one of the strongest sides, and that, like I said, this was the resurgence of the competition where coaches were starting to realise, I can't throw my 18-year-old kid who I think's good enough to play first grade. I can't throw him out to play against straight into the NRL. I need him to play against men, so they'd have 3 or 4 games against the big boppers, and then if he liked what he saw, then he'd put him up. I know some of the, probably the greatest coach of this time, Wayne Bennett, he was a big believer in it. Not so much. I think I had this conversation with one of the senior members at the time, and I was like, so he's a big fan of the comp. It'd be good to get him to talk about it. And he's like, he's more a fan of them playing against men, which is fair. So he just wanted his young players to play against bigger bodies and feel that step up in physicality, feel that step up in speed, and then they could progress through if he was happy with it. All right, we'll roll into 2014. So the Panthers flogged the Knights in the grand final that year. The Panthers finished first, the Knights finished 8th. Panthers had a team, some pretty handy players. Wanga Blake, Wes Nagama, Isaiah Yao, Regan Campbell-Gillard. Just a few players that played in that team. Anything stand out from that year, Terry?
Well, Cronulla didn't win it. That was the first thing that stood out.
Couldn't back up, mate.
No, couldn't back up. But, I mean, Cronulla, they just scraped through into the top 8. But talking about Penrith, I mean, before they were the feeder club with Windsor, it was the first year as Penrith. They took over from Windsor, finished as minor premiers. Like Cronulla did in 2013, they dominated the competition. And a lot of good players in there. Even they made the top 18. But players like Sam Anderson, just going back to Sam Anderson, he was again in the team of the year, which you'll read out. But he was another great New South Wales Cup player.
Yep.
Played a lot of rep footy, and he was one of the standouts and the reason why Penrith went all the way and won the grand final.
Steve, is there any players there that you see that jump out at you?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, there is a bit of talent there, but once again, I can't just keep saying Josh Mantellato.
Who features again, yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind the Rostock. The Rostock was pretty good value at New South Wales Cup level as well. Had a bit of a short but pretty sweet and fun New South Wales Cup career. NRL career. So the Rostock's another guy I wouldn't mind having some consideration for. Outside of that, there aren't a lot of guys, if I'm going to be enjoyed, with all due respect to these blokes, that really stand out. A lot of guys who've had a bit of success and a lot of people in first grade and in New South Wales Cup, but no one I think really stands out as being a New South Wales Cup kind of, the upper echelon of New South Wales Cup, shall we say.
No, I tend to agree with you. But I'll read out the team. So Nathan Ross was at fullback. Beretta Farima, who was the player of the year from Wenny, was on one wing. Sammy Saluma and Asapili Fine were in the centres. The other winger was Josh Mantellato, so I think that's his third appearance in Teams of the Year. The halves were Will Smith from the Penrith Panthers and Michael Dobson from the Knights. Magnus Stromquist, who's one of another great names in rugby league from the Roos, was joined in the front row by Tim Robinson from the Sharks. Mitch Williams was the hooker. Jake Foster, Raymond Fatala Mariner and Ryan Simpkins in the back row. The bench was Tyler Randall, Shannon Wakeman, Sam Anderson, Lachlan Burr, and 18th man was Clint Gutherson, and coach was Rip Taylor of the Wyong Roos. So
now there's a man who might deserve a coaching spot, though.
That's another thing too. How do we narrow that down? Do you do an assistant? Because there's blokes like, I think Justin Holbrook's on 2 premierships. He won those 2 Dogs premierships, so that's got to say something. All right, 2015, I was at this grand final. I wasn't working for the New South Wales Rugby League anymore, but I went up to Leichhardt Oval to watch this. Was the Knights and the Wyong Roos. The Derby, was it the F3 up that way? I don't get to go out much anymore. The F3 Derby. The player of the year was Mitch Barnett. I'll roll through the team quickly. Omar Schlamankel from the Roos was the fullback. The wingers were Curtis Rowe and Tyrone Phillips. Kerrod Holland and Sammy Saluma. So that's 2 appearances for Sammy Saluma. Sammy Saluma moved from Mount East to Newtown that year. Josh McCrone and Mitch Cornish were in the halves. Russell Packer from the Cutters on his return to rugby league and his return back to first grade was the front rower. Luke Page, the White Kummel, was the other front rower. Mitch Williams again. Mitch Barnett, Adam Elliott, Lalani Latu in the back row. Damien Cook makes his second appearance in Teams of the Year, this again in the 14 jersey. John Pallavi, Daniel Alvaro, Sean Lane from the Bulldogs. Round out the bench, and Rip Taylor gets his second pick as Coach of the Year. So, is there anyone there we like? I think there's a few players for me that are starting to feature more and more, which means they start to push themselves up for selection.
Mitch, you've got again Mitch Williams again.
Yeah, Mitch Williams.
Damien Cook, this time with Canterbury.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I mean, Josh McCrone's had a pretty handy reserve grade career in Australia, and I know he plays for Toronto now, doesn't he? Over in the Super League,
the Wolfpack.
Yep.
But once again, he's just not someone I see. He's a great player, but it's not someone I see as one of the big stars in the New South Wales Cup. No. Very handy first grader. Don't get me wrong. Very good for the Canberra Raiders, but just. No one. I mean, I think in this back end of this stuff, Mitch Barnett really started to pick up as a reserve grader, now a regular first grader at the Knights. But once again, outside of Cook and Williams, there's no one who really jumps out for me at this time.
Yeah, no, I tend to go, Terry.
Going back to 2014, that was the first year that the New South Wales Cup wasn't played. It was played on its own, the grand final.
Yep.
The first year was at Sydney Football Stadium, and then they went to Parramatta.
Yep.
And then from about the 2015 season, I believe that it started going back the other way, where a lot of the teams wouldn't drop as many players back, or they wouldn't promote players. It started to change the way the NRL was. You have your 30 players, and if they were injured or if they weren't good enough for the NRL, they would just rest them.
Yeah, there was a lot of. I sort of didn't come through a lot in maybe the back end. They started holding the name blokes in 18 and 19 jerseys who you think would go back to play New South Wales Cup, but they didn't. They never pushed them back.
No.
But yeah.
Yeah, the quality did change from that 2015 season. You could see it, and I was covering a lot, but still covering a lot of the New South Wales Cup games then, and you could see it.
Yeah, so I think that year the Knights played in that Intra-Super State Championship. Who they played? Was that the year that they played the Ipswich Jets, and the Jets had that different kind of footy where we'd drop out short and the
contact footy.
Yeah.
Ben Walker.
Yeah.
Chris, it was Ben and Chris.
It won them the game that day, so I'm not gonna take that off them. But yeah, so that's when. From that next year, the 2016 one where we'll dive into now, the Cutters beat Mounties courtesy of a Drew Hutchison field goal 74 minutes into the game at Parramatta Stadium, which is Bankwest Stadium now. That year, I sort of saw that was, not a resurgence in quality's not the right word, but in respect for it, almost like it was. They went.
That's correct. It is respect because, sorry to butt in.
Yeah, that's right.
The first 14, Northern Pride and Penrith played. That was the first year of that state championship. Penrith, mate, they were still celebrating.
Yeah,
They were celebrating. When they played, they were dropping the ball. I remember Wes Nagama, all these, they were dropping the ball. They weren't even, and Northern Pride won by 4 points. And Penrith could have still won, and they played that bad. And the same thing happened with the Newcastle Knights. Couple of players, they were just still celebrating until the day before the game. And then by 2016, Queensland was going, we've got the best team, best competition. We've won the first two. And they were starting to give the New South Wales people, a lot of lip.
Yeah.
And so the Waratahs, and it was with Jason Dimitri as coach, he said, well, no, we're going to celebrate the following week when we play Burleigh Bears.
Yeah. Didn't Dimitri won it with the Pride, didn't he?
He did win.
Yeah. So
with the Cutters, he said, no, we're not going to celebrate. We're going to celebrate after the state championships, and we're going to focus on it. And that was the first year that the New South Wales Cup winners actually played. They decided to turn up. And what happened?
They flogged them.
12.
Yeah, they smashed them. Yeah. That was there was so many Queensland tears that day. It was awesome. I don't think I wasn't working, but I think I was covering it for 16. Yeah, I was covering it for NRL. So there was so many tears on socials from the QRLs. It was the best, just watching them absolutely demolish them. All right, I'll roll through the team and then I'll throw to you, Steve. So fullback was Zach Santo from Mounties. One of the wings, RIP, Carter Ottio, who was amazing that year. In the centres was Charles Nickel Clockstad and Levi Dodd from the Cutters. Clockstad was at the Warriors. On the other wing, Josh Addo-Carr, another Australian and New South Wales winger. Josh Cleland from the Jets, who was a great New South Wales Cup player, was the 5'8". Sam Williams from Mounties was the half. Shannon Wakeman and Aloni Vunakese were the front rowers. Matt McEurick from the Jets, who I'm a big fan of, just a hard-working, no-nonsense hooker. So the back row was Tyron McCarthy, Jared Kennedy, and Zane Tedavano. So on the bench, they had Justin Hunt, Kern Capel, Jacob Host, and Lloyd Perrott. And the coach, of course, was Jason Demetrio. So anything there you see, Steve?
Yeah, there are a couple of guys here I actually really like. I mean, I'm going to have to say Charntical Klotstad and Josh Addo-Carr, great first graders. Once again, sorry, guys, you just didn't spend enough time in the Cup, from my opinion. So I'm going to have to overlook you. But Josh Cleland, very good for Newtown. Sam Williams is very good for Mounties and still kicks around for Mounties these days. So he's a guy who I have a lot of respect for as a New South Wales Cup player and someone who I'd look into getting, who wouldn't look out of place in this team. Ditto Mac McEurick. And, yeah, those are some guys. Oh, Kurt Catewell.
Yeah.
Kurt Catewell is one guy who, this is my Newtown bias shining through, but he was very, very good for Newtown.
Yeah.
I think he only played about 2 or 3 years' worth of New South Wales Cup for Newtown while he was contracted to Cronulla. He's now at Penrith. But he was very, very good for the Jets, and I know a lot of people in the club still rate Kurt quite highly. So Kurt really stands out for you. And even Justin Hunt, I've seen that. I know he usually got an interchange place in a lot of these teams, but Justin Hunt has just recently started to pop up a bit more.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think Capewell, if you read the papers, is next cab off the rank for Queensland. So maybe a bit harder now. Valentine Holmes is back and stuff like that, but I know he featured in Queensland emerging squads and stuff like that. So, he must be doing something right. So we'll roll into 2017. So the Panthers defeated the Warangaroos. I think that might have been at Leichhardt, the one I went up and see. I'm not quite sure. Where was that? 2017, sorry, wasn't. Where was 17 at? Was it at Parramatta Stadium?
No, Leichhardt.
I was living in England, so I have no idea.
It was a Leichhardt Oval.
It was Leichhardt, all right.
Leichhardt, yeah.
Yeah, so fullback was Luke Sharp from the Roos. Wingers were Beretta Farimo, his second appearance, Tom Hughes from the Knights. Centres was Matt Ikavalu and Ed Murphy from the Bears. Ikavalu was at the Roos. Cleveland makes a second appearance for the Dogs. Cameron Cullen from the Blacktown Workers Seagulls, a nice nuggety workhorse halfback I'm a big fan of. Alona Vunakese makes his second appearance in the Team of the Years. Mitch Rain from the Panthers. Kurt Dillon from the Jets. Jamil Hopewadi, who's a current Brisbane Broncos starting back row, which may change with injuries returning. The likes of Alex Glenn coming back from injury. I said Jamil Hopewati. Reece Martin from the Bulldogs and Shane Whitelaw from the Bears round out the starting team. So the bench was Mason Lino from the Warriors, Defoe Sipley from the Warriors, Scott Sorensen from Mounties, and Rod Griffin from the Bulldogs. And coach was Rip Taylor. And I think the player of the year that year was Cam Cullen from Blacktown Workers. So we're starting to see. So who was it? Vunakese, second year. Cleland, second year. Are these guys starting to come into consideration for you, Steve?
Well, Aloni was a really good New South Wales Cup player. Played how many years he played? With Bill May, with Wyong. He was one of those players you knew will turn up for New South Wales Cup and perform. And even Ed Murphy, he didn't get into too many Team of the Year. He did in 2017, but he was a good player for North Sydney for many years and captain as well.
Yeah. What about you, Steve? Anyone for you from that team?
Yeah. Alona Vunakese. He was someone who's probably definitely worthy of consideration. I'm going to have to play my hand here, guys. 2017, I was living overseas, so I didn't see a lot of this season, and I didn't see much of 2018 either, so I'm not going to be much help for the next 2 years. But, yeah, based on what I remember of Alona Vunakese, both at Balmain and at Wyong, he's someone who probably deserves a run at some point or deserves a look in.
Yep. No, I don't.
Mason Lino. Mason Lino recently has been I always think of Mason Lino as a Warriors NYC player, but the more I think about it, he's been very good for Newcastle the last couple of years as well. Got a bit of a first grade run last year, but also very good for Newcastle at New South Wales Cup level as well. Yeah,
no, I tend to agree. All right, let's roll quickly into 2018. So this is here the Bulldogs defeated the Jets. Sorry, Newtown fans. Player of the year was Caleb Aikens from the Panthers. So we'll go through the teams. So Caleb Aikens was the captain at fullback. Jordan Pereira, Patrick Herbert, and Adam Kieran Herbert and Kieran were in the centres. Pereira and Sione Katoa were on the wings. Katoa for Newtown. Connor Tracy and Kyle Flanagan at 6 and 7. Kade Ellis and Runuf Tumunga were the front rowers. Reece Robson was a hooker, very, very good player. Luke Garner, one of my favourite West Tigers players. Satili Tupanua from Wyong and Blake Laurie from the Dragons was in the back row. Darren Nichols' second appearance, I do believe. Tom Amone, Liam Martin, Tavita Sate from the Warriors were on the bench, and coach was Greg Maddison, who I think from memory he had another good year. See, like Maddo makes us. You have an argument for Maddo for being one of the coaches, if not the coach for the year. He's won 2 premierships, got his team to finals.
He's been there for 13 years.
Yeah,
it's the same with Taylor. They've been there. They've done the hards and they've won premierships, and they've got to be up there.
Yeah. So, all right. So, is anyone there, Terry, that you think deserves a big push?
Well, just going through it, there wasn't not a lot of them went further into the just regular NRL players. You still got a couple of players like there's Kyle Flanagan, there's kind of Trace, but not regular ones. I mean, they've still got time because it's 2018, but you got to go all the way back to 2016 when you started seeing some regular first graders. But no one really stands out for me, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, guys like Blake Laurie who'll play a lot of the year for the Dragons. Luke Garner should start for the Tigers most games. Renov Tumunga should probably get a fair bit of time for the Eels. But yeah, you're not wrong. I think Flanagan will play most of the year in the 7 jersey for the Roosters. But yeah, it's probably one of the not Thinny. Satili Tupanua's probably going to get a bench spot now that Boyd Cordner's back for my Roosters. So yeah, there's a bit of merging tale. I suppose we're getting some forwards that, like we know, that forwards sort of blossom a little bit later than halves and stuff like that. They need a bit more time to play in these levels of footy. But let's roll the last year, the 2000.
Sorry to interrupt you, Brad.
It's all right.
There is one man who I think actually might need to come into consideration here. The number 14, Darren Nichols, a veteran of the second tier and a big performer at both Q Cup and New South Wales Cup level. I think he's had 2 first grade appearances. He's one of the eldest debutants in first grade. I remember he made that debut for the Dragons against the Storm during an Origin weekend. I think considering his longevity, and he's appeared a few times in these team of the years, he's been with Balmain, North, South, he's been everywhere. He might be worth someone to keep it. Is he someone worth keeping an eye on?
No, good call.
He's one of those players that clubs do purchase him or sign him up to play at New South Wales Cup level because they need someone with a old head to teach the younger players. And you talk to a lot of the coaches in the NRL and they say the same thing. There's a few players there that they only sign up because for that reason, and he's one of them because he's. I think he's a teacher by Darren Nichols. He might be a teacher or something, or they're helping with getting him a job. Yeah. They give him some money, and that's how it works. Yeah,
but also if injuries fall, he's going to do a job for you. Will kick the corners, lead the team around, and won't may not have the ability to break a game open, step 5 blokes and score a try like a Sean Johnson, but will kick the corners, do what he's told, and let other senior players in the NRL team do what they need to do. So let's roll into the last year. So the Jets, one of the great victories, the Billy Magoulias miracle. I'm sure Terry was up and about watching one of the Greek boys doing it. And how good was it too, him doing it not once but twice then in the National Championship. Also good watching the Queensland tears there because they all thought they had it too. It was the best. Almost as good as what happened later too when Canberra thought they were going to win the grand final. La la la, not for you. So the Jets defeated Wenny 20-15 out there at Bankwest Stadium.
Again.
What's that?
6 again.
Yeah, no, mate. Don't start me. That didn't have anything to do with the grand final. Player of the year was Billy Britton. Had a great year for South Sydney. I think he played a couple of NRL games while Damien Cook was on Origin duty. So I'll read through the team. William Kennedy, Bubba Kennedy's boy, had a great year for the Jets at fullback. Mawini Hiroti, who I do believe is he at the Sharks now, Terry? Probably not playing there now, but maybe in their second tier contracts. I thought I saw him in one of their trials. He was on the wing for them. Morgan Harper and Tristan Saylor in the centres, Greg Lalicio on the other wing, Connor Tracy from the Rabbitohs in the 6, Adam Clune in the 7, Lachlan Tim and Max Bailey front rowers, Billy Britton was the 9 and the captain, Jackson Ford, who I think is one we should watch and will feature for the Dragons heavily this year, if not next year, William Burns and Billy Magoulias were the other back rowers, Rhys Davies, Jamin Jolliffe, Tim Manor and Scott Sorensen round out the bench, so it's a bench of Wenny Magpies and Newtown Jets. So coach was Rip Taylor from the Magpies, who had his heart ripped out from his body as he saw the Jets score that try. But is there anyone there that's starting to...
I think maybe just Scott Sorensen, maybe. Just go back to Roddy. He's a Cronulla, by the way, 2020.
Yeah, I thought so, yeah.
Scott Sorensen is probably, he's played there for a few years, playing at Mounties and a few other teams. He was at North Sydney as well. Mm-hmm. But a few of the other guys, I think they're just starting to come through. I think if we had in the next, 3-4 years, you might get a few of those guys. Yep. Yeah, but not, yeah. I don't think they'll make the team for the deco.
You're a Sharks man. Do you think Billy Magoulias deserves to push his way into the starting team?
Look, based on that, just that year, he had a good year, but there's just too many other players that just had a big impact in the 10 years. He's only had the 1 year. He had a good year.
I'm more saying NRL this year, Terry. I'm just saying this year. when the footy resumes.
He'll be, especially off the bench. He played in round 2 game against Melbourne. He's always around the 17th, 18th man, so he's definitely going to play a bit more than he did last year. Now that Paul Gallen's retired.
Yeah, and another one I think last year who's starting to show that he's an actual real good footballer is Toby Rudolph, who was the Jets last year, starting to play for some serious first-grade minutes for the Sharks. But he's also been a Q Cup guy as well, so I'm not saying he makes this team, but if you're doing like a combined New South Wales Cup, Queensland Cup team, he'd be one of the blokes. Like for me, if you're doing that, Sam Anderson suddenly gets picked up. Desi Nichols, if you were doing a combined reserve-grade team, those blokes who have played both leagues would be, starting to heavily feature heavily. All right, that wraps up going through all the teams of the decade. So let's just wrap this pod up because we've been going 50-odd minutes. But how do we go to the next level? Do we put this out to the punters? Do we go do pods? Like, I'm not sure how you guys are placed with time. Like, I don't do much now until footy's back. But do we go through and pick blocks of positions? Do we go and then announce the team at the end of the thing? Do we do a couple of pods where we try and get some guests on and get their opinions and let the fans vote? Look, I'm quite easy. I think we may have a fan vote that they can give suggestions and then we pick them. Maybe, and then you have, if we can get some people like a Dave Gower on. I know that might be a bit harder with his para at the moment, but I'm sure we can reach out and ask. Getting a Josh Manolato, Mitch Williams on to talk, and getting Rip Taylor. Like, I'd love to. He's another one that you get talking about that progression of that decade, how the game and how the comp changed and how much it got better or it got worse. If we could get a few interviews chucked into that mix with a few pods, if we could get 5 or 6, and then maybe we pick the team over 5 or 6 pods, what do you think?
Yep. Well, I think in that basis... Oh, you go ahead, Terry.
Sorry. Yeah, I think, look, we can throw it out to some of the fans because they might come up with some players that we've
missed. Yeah.
Just as a suggestion. By getting the likes of Greg Madison, Rip Taylor, Paul Fletcher, those likes, they can come back and say, look, I was really impressed with this player.
Yeah.
He didn't get a lot of awards like, player of the year, but he was always week in, week out. He was, a grinder. Yeah. And they're players that you've got to look at.
Yeah, go, Steve.
I think the way things are kind of structured now, I think we pick maybe 1 or 2 players at the end of every episode based on position.
Yep.
So next week we could pick 1 fullback and 1 winger. So homework for us would be to rock up with a fullback and a winger in mind, and then we'll see what we agree on.
Yep.
But we can also have a people's choice. So at the end we could have the pod choice and the people's choice.
Oh, I like the people's choice. It sounds very good. A bit of rock. The people's choice. I love it. Yeah, I'm all for it. So I could set up some polls and stuff. And what I think we do is we try and maybe next week we'll try and get someone like a Mantalato, if I can organise him to come on to get him to talk about stuff, because maybe we pick a back 3. If we pick back 3 next week, we start at the back. And so,
and you know what? If Josh, I was already strongly contemplating Josh. If he
I'm
comes
not.
on,
I don't.
You're a guaranteed. You're a guaranteed starter.
If you come on,
we're putting it out to you, Josh. You're a starter.
If you come on, you're a walk-up start. You'll go a long way in this team of the decade if you get on. So let's just put it out there and see the reaction to see what people think. I have a few thoughts on putting a few decentish names in there just for, like I speak to Cookie for work a fair bit. Maybe, I'm not saying we push him in if he doesn't deserve to be, but, probably does, in my honest opinion. But whether he becomes that 14 and Mitch Williams is the 9, I don't know. Like, that's something we can leave open to debate. And let's just put it out onto the social world and all that sort of stuff and see what people say. And I actually quite like your idea of we're going to pick a team. We're going to put 5 people up for a vote on a website. You guys can vote. Yeah. It's going to be open for a week. The top 3 people that you vote for, or the top 3 voted, will be that position. Or if we do we might have to do it position by position. So maybe the wingers have 2 positions, the fullbacks is just 1. Then we put it, and we'll work out a voting system that the fans can have their own team, and then hopefully we can get some of these players on. Maybe it's worth a shot. Some of these guys should be kicking around. I know Aloni works in the council near us, so hopefully he'd be a good person to get on. But yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. I know you guys are passionate about the comp, and it's good to speak to people like that. But let's wrap one up there. Tez, thanks for joining us. Hopefully the mags are killing it, and hopefully plenty of people are buying it. I'll put a link to Terry's website in the description of the video and on our website for you guys to have a look at. Steve, thanks for joining us. I know you're a passionate man. Keep up the good stuff with Newtown. I've been enjoying the social coverage. Some of that stuff too I wish we could get up at the NRL, but no one wants to listen to me. Boys, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk soon, eh?
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks.